George and Desiree Green. They're the publishers of America West, and we publish the Phoenix journals and a newsletter. There are about 35 journals now, and we put out a journal newsletter every 2 to 3 days in the week. George has had a very fascinating career, and he's been a financial advisor, bank director, licensed real estate broker, general contractor, builder, developer, investment advisor, and mortgage broker. And this afternoon he's going to talk about the economy and what's going on in that area. George will have Desiree get up at near the end of his presentation and speak on the spiritual transition and its meaning. So please join me in welcoming George Green.
Thanks, Sandy. We haven't done this yet, but there are a couple gentlemen that spent their time putting together this seminar, and we really appreciate their efforts. It's gone so far. And I want to thank Bo Grice for taking his time to come away to give you guys some insight on a direct basis on how corrupt our government is. And I want to let you know, Sandy gave you a little bit of my background. I've been in the investment business basically for some 20-some years. As a real estate developer, I built shopping centers, office buildings, motels, and restaurants. A little closer. Good. People are, just so you know, some of the comments that were made previously, Dr. Agnostin's book will be available probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and register your name in the back. Bo Greitz's book, which I suggest each one of you get a copy of it because he only has a certain amount that are going to be delivered within the next 10 days. Make sure you get back to his table and order it because it's going to be a classic. He spent his life getting to this point, and 850 pages revealing names, places, and everything else should be something to give you some validation. Now, a lot of the people have heard me on the radio before around here, and a lot of you are here because of that. And they want to know a little bit how I got involved with ETs and how I got into the publishing business and how it all works out in this new thing they call the New World Order, or as Newt Gingrich calls it, the New World Paradigm. And if you look up the word paradigm, it means order. So we have to get the word away from things. It goes back to 1958 when I was in the military. I was stationed at Edwards Air Force Base. I was doing the post-flight inspection on the X-15 one morning. When I finished doing that, I took my Jeep and I went to an area called North Base, which is a series of hangars that I hadn't been to. For you that are not familiar with Edwards Air Force Base, it's a civilian base primarily. There's about 25,000 people work there, and there's about 800 airmen. I was one of the airmen. I also was cleared for all of the, quote, top secret things that we could do. And I was inside the perimeter, and I went to this area because I just hadn't been there before, and I was curious. As I went to one of the hangars, inside one of the hangars was a circular object about 21 feet across. It was silver, had no seams, and had my curiosity because I hadn't gone out to work on it. I mean, that morning I'd worked on the X-15, the B-58, the F-107, the F-105s, all of the latest, at that time, 30 years ago, secret things that we had. Well, I came back and asked my commander about it, and he said that's an ion-powered craft designed by Sikorsky. Sikorsky's the helicopter people. This craft was to be used in outer space. I accepted what my commander told me. I went back to my room, and I mentioned it to my buddy who happened to be the base photographer, and he says, George, they're not telling you the truth. It's an alien craft. He showed me pictures of the craft along with 2 dead aliens, which were about 39 inches tall. I didn't see them, I'm just telling you, I saw their photographs. I saw the craft. They were humanoid looking, similar to the pictures that you see that Whitney Strieber talks about. I didn't go any further than that, but I was a little upset, so I went back down and I talked to my commander. My commander said, look, George, when the government is ready to tell the world the truth about UFOs and ETs, they will. Until then, you stick to your story. I said, fine. As a dutiful airman, I didn't say another word. Surprisingly, within 3 weeks, I had orders transferring me to Japan. However, when I got to Japan, the base didn't exist. I didn't put it together. You have to understand, 19 years old, you're not doing too much. I just figured, well, you know, they told me that I was going over there because I had worked on these new secret planes that we had, and they were going to send a squadron over there for a mission. When I got to Japan, the guy said, well, there's nothing going on over here. So basically, I had 3 weeks running around Tokyo at the taxpayer's expense, enjoying myself. Then they assigned me to the mat space, which was Tachikawa. I spent about 3 months there. Then they reassigned me to Mississippi, made an instructor out of me in electronics. At that time, I said, what's going on with this goofy outfit? And I want to try to get out. I was close friends with a senator in Colorado, where I'm from, and I contacted them, and unfortunately, that was the wrong thing to do because they promoted me and transferred me then into a missile guidance school. And I got sent into the Hound Dog program for guidance technology and the guidance in the missile, which is still, one of the missiles still flying. So you imagine it's 30 years old now, the technology. I got out of the service. I entered, my father owned a packing house. I worked with him for a little while, bought into a truck line. Actually, I took it over from a bank because I had a lot of banker friends. We got out of that business, and my banker buddies were always asking me something. And if it's like you, I need some money in deposit. Anybody had that kind of thing? Gone to the bank and they said, open up your bank account, put your savings in here? Remember that story? Sure, it's all happened to you. Well, my bankers knew I had a lot of friends with a lot of money. And they said, look, George, what kind of deal can we do to get money in our banks? And I said, well, sounds to me it's pretty simple. Why don't you just pay them more interest? And they said, we can't. We're limited to what we can pay. And I'm one of these people that says, if there's a way, I'm going to find it. So we started talking about it, and I said, here's another way we can do this. Why don't you pay me an advertising allowance of 3%? And they said, well, we can do that. So they would pay me 3% for all the money that I would put in the bank. In comes my friends. I'll use you as an example. Let's say you have $10,000 and it's in your local bank and you're getting 7% interest. Now, why would you do business with me? Because I'm going to pay you 2% up front for putting your money in this bank, federally insured. I'm just giving you some scenario because it works in a little later. Let's take out a bank that has 10 million in assets. We'll keep it small. And they come up and they tell me, George, I need $5 million. And I said, fine. So I make arrangement. We put $5 million in the bank. Bank goes in. It's in a 1-year certificate of deposit. Remember when Bo talked a little while ago about fractionalization of money? They can put out 20 times, but he had a bigger figure, but it's roughly 20 times. Right now, it's no limit. But at that time, it was like 20 times they could put out. So if I put $1 million in, they could put out 20 million in loans. Now here's where the problem comes in the rub. The banks basically are chartered by the Federal Reserve System. At the end of 1 year, you, as my client, said, George, what are you going to pay me? You going to pay me my 2% again? Now, you didn't care about paying me my 1%. I told you up front what it was. And I said, well, I don't know. So I called my bank buddy over, and he says, we can't do it. We loaned the money out, and we don't have any more fees to pay your advertising. I said, fine. Guess what? I got another banker over here who says they're going to do the same thing. We were moving millions of dollars in every way, in every direction. Now, what this happens, I'm going to take you this $10 million bank, and $5 million of it is the money that we put in, and I actually controlled, but I didn't have anything to do with the bank. We pull the $5 million out of the bank. What does that do, logically, to that bank? Puts it into what we call an impaired position, impaired capital position. Their only source of money then is who? The Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve has to step in to protect their bank. Now remember, everything was insured by a corporation called FDIC. Giving you some background here. Federal Depository Insurance Corporation. Now this is a private company that has the ultimate position. If they go broke, they call on the American taxpayer to pay for it. Well, what happened a little bit later on down the line, I was moving so much money around, just as a scenario, that the Federal Reserve stuck an extra $1 million in my account one morning. And they come back the next day and say, we made a mistake, but you signed these papers to pull it out. Once they put it in, see, they can't take it back out. So I gave them the money back, and they gave me a little, it's a lucite cube full of 16th century porcelain coins. Just as a reminder, or just as a favor, because I gave them back the $1 million, because I didn't, could care less about that. I was trying to be honest with them. Well, it turns out And this is back 30 years ago, to give you an idea what had happened. There was about 3 of us in the country, were moving millions of dollars, and we were controlling the bank. The Federal Reserve was not. I'm outside of the system. Guess what banks did in the United States? The Federal Reserve sent a notice to all bankers not to do business with George Green. I don't know why. Except for, I understood, well, it kind of put me out of business. Temporarily, I worked a deal with the Federal Savings Loan Insurance Corporation, or not them, but the Savings and Loans, continued my business for about 5 months, and then they got orders to shut me down too. Meanwhile, I still have lots of money, everybody thinks I'm a genius, and I had a no-risk deal for people. Meanwhile, I had some friends I was going to lunch with every day, and they started the Village Inn Pancake House Corporation, or out in California, it's called Baker Square, and they said, well, we want to expand, we don't have any money. And I was dabbling at that time. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll build the buildings for you and lease them back on a 20-year basis. So we did that. I built in about 20 states. And what happened, we put the Village Inn Pancake House in a very precarious financial position. Let me tell you how that worked. Typical Village Inn cost me about $300,000 to build at that time. I had a guarantee from them from basically 12% a year or 1% a month against 6% of their gross income on each one of them. I would give 10% to my investors, and we split anything above that. I would also utilize certain tax shelter techniques that I had developed in order to shield the income. The trouble is, the Village Inn itself, every time they signed a lease, they had to declare on their books the long-term liability. $3,000 a month times 12 is $36,000 a year. 20 years is $720,000. If I had, let's say, 20 of those, then they owe me $14 million. Indirectly. Now, so they owe us the money, and their financial statement's $1 million. True, at the time. Their accountant said they couldn't borrow any more money. I refused to finance the insides. You know, the kitchen equipment and all that, because that's garbage. And I said, I don't want to get involved with that. I want the building and the land, because I could predict that everything was going up. And so I set it together. I was more than successful. My investors were receiving between 25 and 100% return on their money every year, tax-free. Pretty heavy, though, because of the investment tax credits, the real estate, and the way I leveraged the property back within the institution insurance companies. Well, that went for a while, and then the Village Inn had an out, and that's when they went public. It's called Vicor Corporation, and they ended up buying all the stuff back. I, at that point, started building shopping centers, office buildings, and other things. So I got pretty heavy, and about, I guess, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, I decided to quit. Enter in the scenario we started with. In 1984, I built a house for a friend of mine in Aspen. My friend was a member of the Trilateral Commission. I had been running around with him, escorted off of planes by Secret Service into governor's offices and senators' offices, and what he would do, since I didn't need any money, we were just having fun, he said, look, I'm going to buy a company, would you liquidate it for me? So I became very exceptional. You heard about what's going on, the leverage buyouts, that kind of thing. I just used the facilities of their money and and basically liquidated the companies out and made him a lot of money. At any rate, in 1984, when I was up at his house that I built for him, his maid had a book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades. In it were incredible color photographs, and I'm sitting here in shock. 25 years later, I'm seeing the same craft in this book that I saw at Edwards Air Force Base. Why didn't the government come out here and tell people, I'm a civilian, I made enough money, I'm going to sit down and do what I can. At that time, I just grabbed an airplane, went on down to Phoenix, and I talked to the authors of the book, and they said there's a gentleman in Switzerland who claims to be in contact with people from the Pleiades. And I said, well, I'm looking at these photographs, and you know, once you see one of these things up close, I'm talking about 20 feet away, there's no mistake. It was one of them. So I said, okay, what can we do? What can I do to assist to get the information out? I'm a real estate developer. I don't want to be bothered with this. You go ahead and do your thing. And he said, all I need is the money. And I said, okay. I assisted him in providing the money for his publishing of his book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades, Volume 2. It's a big 12 by 12 inch picture book. But one of the stipulations that I found out, I don't care how much money people made off of me at that time, I'd like to see it back. I had so many people steal from me anyway in the development business that this is one of these things I just looked at and I says, you know, go do what you want to. They decided after they got to selling about 3,000 of these books at $40 a piece that I had more money than God, and so therefore I didn't need it back, and that's what he told me. And I said, no, wait a minute, that wasn't my agreement. So I flew down and I filed suit against him. I don't normally do it because it's a waste of time. But he hadn't sold all the books yet. I paid for them anyway. At the same time, I felt compelled, there was some more information. This Palladian connection with Billy Meyer were so incredible that there was this information that was important to people, and I thought it should go out. I mean, it was just somehow a compulsion inside. So I grabbed a plane and I flew to Switzerland, and I talked to the gentleman myself. And when I was over there, a lot of things happened. One of the things that happened, I received a document from them. It was just a simple one-page deal. And it was a message from the commander of the spacecraft that he had been in contact. And the commander's name was Quetzal. And it asked Billy to see if I would agree to contract with him to assist and get the information out. Now, what would you do? I jumped at the chance, right? I said, I'll do it. Except for, this guy down in Arizona had me a little bothered because I already dropped a bunch of money on it. I didn't tell you about the money I put into the movie of the thing. At any rate, I gave it to my attorneys in Beverly Hills. They checked the thing over. After 30 days, we found out the gentleman in Switzerland gave away the worldwide rights to his story. Now, at this time, just so you know what happened, when we were in Switzerland, a lot of things went on, and I'm going to turn the lights off now so you can see pictures of UFOs that are close, and I'm going to fill you in the story as it comes down to that line. Gentleman that I met in Switzerland, and his name is Billy Meyer. He's about, I don't know, close to 60 years old right now. He has claimed to be in contact with several of the ETs. That means not only the Palladians, but other groups of intelligence that is coming down. They picked Billy because he's in Switzerland, a neutral country. The aliens claim that the United States and Russia have an agreement to shoot them out of the skies when they come here, and they've been doing it since the 40s. His first contact was a woman. Her name was Semyasi. A woman would come up, and they always feel non-hostile. That was the reason why they sent him out. It's very humanoid looking. This is a drawing. They didn't show a picture because she may be walking with innocent cells. What they claim is this planet was engineered for 500 million people maximum. That's all it can sustain on an ecological basis in what they call natural. These photographs were taken inside what Billy was taking the spacecraft, inside the spacecraft, because he was taken numerous times to other planets, other universes.
Why is it fuzzy?
Because the craft somehow caused the emanations. Now, Billy only has one arm, and I'll show you some other things. The next picture probably a little bit better. Still fuzzy, but they don't look any different than we are. Now, when I was in Switzerland, this place in town is called Hinterschmidt-Rudi. It's about a 45-minute drive outside of Zurich. We went and asked the neighbors if they'd ever had seen anything, and they'd seen lots of things. When I was there the last time, I went to the neighbor and he said, look, there was a little farmer, and I said, did you see anything recently? He said, yep, come on out here. And he showed me huge footprints in the mud, and he said there was a man 7 meters tall standing here this morning. That's 21 feet. I come back in and ask Billy about it, and Billy says, yeah, he just shrugged his shoulders, and he showed me plaster casts of some other footprints that were about 1 inch across, and he says, don't you know the story of leprechauns and fairies? Now, the only reason why I'm showing you these pictures is because they have the craft hovering in the background with the people sitting there to look at. Now, this is taken with Billy first time on his camera. Remember, you can't focus very well, and the camera was not quite fuzzy, but you're going to see some incredible pictures as we go down the line. Now, if you take a look at that craft over it, that is similar to the one I saw at Edwards Air Force Base. We'll see a couple more real close up. That's to give you an idea of the terrain that's out there. There's no mistaking about it. See the town? By the way, that craft spent 2 hours over the town. The French sent a Mirage fighter over there. It used all its weapon systems at it. Nothing happened. Actually, the weapon system froze up. It's in the French government's records. I'm just just showing you different degrees. A gentleman by the name of Wally Gentleman, who, by the way, his crew, he's won 3 Academy Awards for the special effects in movies, including his crew doing 2001, to give you an idea, has examined the photographs, went over the material, and he says, no one-armed man in Switzerland can do this. And he says, I could do it if you give me a budget at $25 million. There is what I saw at Edwards Air Force Base. Now I want you to describe this craft. That's the problem that we have with anybody. If we start from one end of the room to the end of the room on the same line, we're going to have a different result at the other side. They put their craft next to trees because it acts as a grounding device to keep it level. They wanted Billy, one of his jobs was to take the most and the best color photographs so there'll be no mistaking. Just so you know, let's look at the craft on the other side of the tree. Can you imagine creating these illusions? I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I'm just telling you that from my experience running around the world, and we went everywhere. My wife's been in China, we've been in Spain and South America. They all give us the same kind of a story. Hey, what are you guys doing? Okay. Is that better? Now, if you're going to create a photograph, how do you create it on the other side of the tree? I'm just showing you these so to tell you that are they real or are they not? So these have to be the most and the best photographs. I have over 2,000 photographs now from UFOs all the way around the world, including one that's over the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't think I brought it in this slide set, but Billy would set down his movie camera, and then he'd take his still camera. We have these photographs of this craft moving and bobbing so you can see it. This was on the front page of the book, the UFO Contact from the Pleiades, so you can get an idea of how the terrain is and how you can measure the size of it. Most of these craft are what they call 2-man or 1-man craft. That's a variation 5. It's got, you can see it's a little bigger and it has more people aboard it. What they tell us, what the Pleiadians tell us, that there's 175 billion other planets within our galaxy. And they won't let us off of this earth until we come back into balance. They say we are the most warlike people around, and they're here as their cosmic brothers to awaken us to the massive lies so we can come into balance so we'll be able to go to these other places. There are 3 in this particular picture. Most UFOs you only see 1, or you see blurs. Now, when we first got involved with my contact, and I'll go a little bit farther after we get to doing this, we had one of these craft follow us for about an hour, my wife and I, on the way from San Diego to Sedona, Arizona, just so my wife could have verification that they exist. Again, we went and talked to the people in the towns around. They had seen these. They just shrugged their shoulders about it. The interesting thing about Billy, where he lives, and I'll show you pictures while, is less than 300 yards from a naval radar station. They never pick up the craft. Now there's another one with the sun glinting on the top of it with the tree. Now you photography people, you can tell me how you can do all these things with the model. There's a drone underneath. There's a lot of samplings they're taking on. What they're telling us that the planet itself historically flips over on its axis about every 12,000 to 13,000 years, i.e. Atlantis, Lemuria, all the history that we have, and what they're telling us about the year 2000, we're going to do it again. And they're here to monitor everything like any good scientist would. They want to get air samples and soil samples and everything. They're telling us that the pollution is so bad now that they hate to come down in here because it makes us sick, or makes them sick. That's Billy. Now I may have a couple slides out of the way, backwards in here, because you can see he's got his arm missing. But that's one of his laser weapons. The laser weapon, and I want you to see these things carefully because I'm going to tell you about technology that our governments have this minute, and they don't want to tell the world about it. He was curious about it. The girl he was in contact with at the time, one of the pictures he saw was named Manara. And they were sent down here to get rid of a beehive that supposedly had genetically changed into changing man off. And they said, well, we were allowed to take it out, and so they were going to use the weapons to kill it. They also used weapons for defense only. The universal laws, or the highest laws, said thou shalt not kill. So they're not allowed to kill anything except for in self-defense. That's the latest in fashions. That's one of the women that you saw, what she's wearing, and the gun. Now, the latest model, I understand, talking to Billy, is about the size of a cigarette lighter. Now, what does it do? A little closer. By the way, for your physicists, it uses cold fusion for its direction of creating. See that hole in the tree? For some of my verification, it was, I went and talked to Billy. I said, Billy, I'm going to go out and take pictures of that laser hole. And there's another one about 20 or 30 feet up in the tree, too. And he says, okay, George, you can do it, but it'll only take 3. I said, okay. Dutifully me took 3 photographs, just so you could see how much power was involved. But both sides. I don't know why it's burned out both directions. Look at that. It's about 20 inches across. The Russians have the technology from 125 miles up today to do exactly that, to go through 10 feet of armor steel and keep the beam on a quarter 24 hours a day. I'm just telling you some of the things they're telling us. Now, you heard about the, quote, circles and everything else that's going on the landing sites. When you see pictures of all the different figures in there, they're just playing around with, quote, their electrical beam weapons and making figures just so they're reminding us that they're there watching us. They're not allowed to interfere, but they can give us information. Now, if you notice the circles, the swirl, that's because of the gyro base, the gyro nation, or gyro matter that they have within running the craft. It runs in a circular motion. They tell us how the craft actually moved. They say that the Germans developed this technology in the early 40s. They have been flying these craft. The Americans called them Foo Fighters. They were doing 7,000 miles an hour in the 40s, but, quote, the gray government has taken this technology and they're keeping it for themselves. What happens after the craft land, generally the ground itself either gets brown. Some of the sites that we went, the ground actually was fused. I've got samples where the dirt became just like porcelain. Anyway, it dies out. Becomes totally died out. The next year it comes back twice as thick. For some reason, millions of bugs and things come around. That's landing in his front yard, by the way, in the wintertime. So to give you an idea, there's the energy's enough to be able to melt everything we have. That's his house in the background. That's a Volkswagen to give you some size of what's going on, and that's his dog. And it's supposed to be really fierce. For some reason, when Desiree and I came over there, he just come over and kind of licked her fingers, but everybody else was biting. Now, what they tell us, in order to go from here to the Pleiades or any place else, they convert matter to light. That is a craft that is not quite physical yet. And then they go from here, for instance, to the Pleiades in the current, what they're telling us now, in less than 10 minutes. So you can begin to see the outline of the craft. Amazing technology. That's Billy Meyer standing in the middle with his hand up in the middle of an energy beam they put around him. I think it's a fascinating picture because, number one, how did they do that energy beam? And I haven't asked the commander about this because you can see the tractor and the cars next to it. I wanted to get more. Generally, I've been finding out a lot of information I didn't know from whom I'm in contact with now. Again, this is Billy's house. This slides backwards, but it just happened. He doesn't have any insulation in the ceilings. Now, about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, I showed these slides, and then the commander looked at it and he started to tell me. The information I got from Billy, this was a new experimental craft. Well, I could accept that. I mean, I worked on experimental planes myself. And they were doing that. The reason why the circles, or the bubbles that you're talking about, are, according to the unified field theory, which we know already, they need more surface area. And that's how that has been developed. Sitting on the ground. Are those close up enough for you? You know what really makes me mad? That's one of ours. I want one. Bo, you want one? I want one.
I want one.
They are keeping that from us, the Gray government, because the metal they're using is called impervium. It's 100 times harder than steel. It glows with electrical charge. Again, the Germans developed the technology in 1938. Now, what happens, remember we talked about the government, the trilalist, etc., or anybody in power, if you had something to put them out of business, you're either, how many of you seen the movie The Formula with George C. Scott? I think of Marlon Brando. Remember, let them play along, you got the best deal, you got this free fuel, and all these things are going to do, you buy it, you never get it out because it's going to break your bank, right? How about this, a metal that doesn't rust, how many years does your car last? Right? Energy, it's free. I can't tax that. That's a Volkswagen bus with a little trailer underneath. See those little protrudences and things down the top? I think that's when they land down and they cause some of that action and reaction. Now, these are some of the pictures. Billy has a few hundred of them. And I just selected some of the best ones because I could bore you with for days. This is the last series. When we were in Switzerland, Billy claimed to be in contact with a Greek priest. And the Greek priest was also in contact with the Palladians, and they gave him the job, this Greek priest. They took him down to the tomb where the shroud was. And in the tomb were some writings. And the writings was of a gentleman by the name of Emmanuel. Everybody know who Emmanuel is? In the Bible, Emmanuel, it's in Isaiah 7, I think, verse 14. He's basically, we call him Jesus. Matthew 1, verse number 22 says Emmanuel. Let's turn the lights back on. At any rate, the Greek priest was given the job to translate these documents. I read them, and they were so incredible, they would totally change the way we look at religion. And I said, uh-oh, what happened? Well, it turns out that the Greek priest took the information out and he was killed. Billy had taken he's a Greek again, he took it from the Aramaic writing, translated it into Greek. Billy's wife was Greek. She translated it from Greek into Schweizer Dutch, or German, what they do in Germany. We had a college kid that translated it from there into English, and let me tell you something. You go through 4 translations of anything, we're in a whole bunch of trouble. Can you imagine? Now, what we found out in our investigation, I'm one of these people who like to investigate everything. We went and found out that our Bibles that we have, and I don't know how many of them that you can find, you're going to find all kinds of variations in every one of them because they're all translated from the Greek, with the exception of Dr. George M. Lamsa's book, the Peshitta, which translated from the Aramaic directly into English. And the differences are so profound, you say, what's going on? I.e., what's a conspiracy? What is the truth? And you start looking at it. In fact, you look at you really start analyzing things different. As we're talking about every day right now, the things that Bo's talking about, everything else, I want you to take and look and examine everything from now on. Don't take a word what I tell you is truth unless I can verify it. And if I can verify it, it'll be probably in one of our books and we'll tell you where it's at. Or we'll tell you the source that can verify the information. Okay. On with the story. I left Switzerland, come back to the United States, found out about this. I couldn't do anything about it. My wife and I said, forget it. I'm tired of real estate development. We started bouncing around the world, just enjoying ourselves. contacting people who claim to be in contact with ETs, and there are a lot of people that are in contact. We were in Spain with Antonio Rivera, who's in contact with a group from the planet Umo. They don't have vocal cords, they write everything out. We went into Beijing, China, and I met with the observatory, took one of our big pretty books and said, you know, look at me, and he just laughs, because they have a monthly magazine in China of all the contacts going on. I'm sitting here, okay, you know, walk away. I go to Brazil, and we were, some of the things that happened in Brazil, there's a group down there at contact that the person claimed he was in contact with another from Mirasol. And they say the contactee's mother was dying of cancer, and the ETs gave them a salve that they put on the palms of their hand and the bottom of their feet and absorbed into the skin. 2 days later, a scab appeared on both of these places. They peeled it off and the cancer was gone. Now guess what? Wouldn't you be interested in finding out what that was? I got a sample. I took it to Chemitox Labs in Boulder, Colorado. For 2 days, they went through a spectrographic analysis to find out what it is. We have nothing we can match up. I have the spectrographic analysis. So anybody that can figure out the thing, we have something that somebody has done for one area or another. I brought those documents to Alan Hynek. Anybody remember that name? Alan Hynek and I discussed this plus a lot of UFO cases, and there are a lot of them he couldn't explain. I asked him why he didn't go to Switzerland. He says, you give me the money. I think that seems to be the story everywhere I go. So anyway, my wife and I, at the end of that, says, all right, we come back to the United States. I started to assist other people in the publishing of UFO books. It became better to set up our own publishing company, and we did that. About 20 months ago, October of '89, I received a very strange document in the mail. And the document says, the following people are under my protection. In there was listed about 30 people. And it was signed by Yurjo Series Hatonn, Commander-in-Chief, Pleiades Sector, Asgard Command, Earth Transition Project, all kinds of things. Guess what? That document I gave you as you came in today. It's called Spacegate. You didn't get the cover letter, but you got the document. I read that, and it was incredible because I knew almost everything in there was true from my own experience. Remember my friend that was up in Aspen, and I told you I traveled around? He asked me one morning if I would like to be the finance chairman for the next president of the United States. And I said, Graham, what do you mean, who is it? And he says, well, his name is Jimmy Carter. And I says, well, I'm a Republican. And he says, it doesn't make any difference. We control them both. Now I'm sitting in a room, not with him, but other people. And I knew that we had more power than we were talking about. In the room was Teddy Kennedy, Paul Volcker, and Pierre Trudeau, Sidney Beckerman, this guy that produced French Connection. And you guys know James MacArthur, played Dano in Hawaii Five-0. I'm just giving you some names that were present. And I says, why me?